back to our channel. Now we are going to start the peritoneal folds. So actually what are peritoneal folds, let us try to understand. So before that, this peritoneum is related to our abdominal contents, so first we are going to discuss about our intestine. You know, our intestinal during the development in embryology, if you remember, first our intestine roots are divided into foregut, right, midgut and hindgut, right. So these are like the parts of the gut. So the foregut in turn develops into first, esophagus. Next, after that it converts into stomach, right. So after stomach, midgut. The midgut will form structures like upper part, even the upper part of duodenum is part of the foregut itself, right. Midgut. Once again, let us say the foregut forms esophagus and stomach, okay, and also the upper part of duodenum up to the opening of common bile duct. And from here the midgut forms like the rest of the duodenum, okay, and the jejunum, ileum, next comes here the cecum, appendix, right. So from there up it forms, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, okay. This is all the part of midgut. Up to right 2/3 of transverse colon, up to here it is a part of midgut. Next, coming from the descending, the hindgut forms left 1/3 of transverse colon and also descending colon, sigmoid colon and proximal part of rectum. So up to this area it is formed by our hindgut. And next comes anorectal canal, which forms the distal part of rectum. And next you have upper part of anal canal up to pectinate line. So actually this is not so important, but why we are discussing this topic over here is because our peritoneal folds are revolving around these structures. Mainly because of these structures, these are the adult structures, right. These are the adult structures. So actually in the childhood, if you see in embryology, if you remember, our GI system used to be just in a form of tube. So it is very simple. Along with the tube, the peritoneum which is present intact with it, that is the visceral peritoneum, and the peritoneum which is outside it, it's a parietal peritoneum, and in between you have a peritoneal cavity. So it is very simple in the case of embryology of a child. So when it is turning into adult, it is somewhat turning into somewhat complex, but we will try to make it easy in this video. So actually, as the organs are changing like this, the peritoneum around it is also evolving around this. So in the formation of the peritoneum around this foregut, midgut, hindgut, there is a change in peritoneum. So before that, we will also discuss what is the blood supply. The foregut is supplied by our celiac artery, right, whereas the midgut is supplied by superior mesenteric artery and the hindgut is supplied by inferior mesenteric artery. So clear up to this. Now let us start the main topic, that is the folding of peritoneum. So actually, if you see the abdominal part of foregut, especially if you see the foregut, let us start the peritoneum around each part. So let us zoom in the foregut now. So first, if you see the peritoneum around the foregut, it is suspended by both mesenteries. So this part is ventral mesentery, okay, this part is dorsal mesentery, right. So this is ventral, this is dorsal mesentery. So in the ventral mesentery of foregut is actually also called as ventral mesogastrium, okay, and the dorsal mesentery is called dorsal mesogastrium, okay. So ventral mesogastrium actually divided by means of liver. Actually liver start forming here. So what is this? It's liver. So liver start forming in the ventral mesogastrium of foregut. So because of liver, this ventral mesogastrium is in turn divided into ventral part of ventral mesogastrium and dorsal part of dorsal mesogastrium, right. So this is the ventral part of ventral mesogastrium and this is the dorsal part of dorsal mesogastrium. So because of this, now our ventral mesogastrium is divided into two parts, and this ventral mesogastrium is forming many ligaments. So what are those ligaments? Like falciform ligament, right and left triangular ligament, superior and inferior layers of coronary ligament. So these are all the different ligaments which are formed from the ventral part of ventral mesogastrium. So what the dorsal part of dorsal mesogastrium it is becoming? It is becoming into the lesser omentum. So that's why in the before video I have said that the lesser omentum is present between the stomach and the liver. So this is a lesser omentum. So very clear. So liver, because of liver, the ventral mesogastrium is forming the ligaments for the liver, and also it is forming a lesser omentum. So done with it. Now let us go into the dorsal mesogastrium in the foregut. So if you see the dorsal mesogastrium, the greater part of the dorsal mesogastrium is like elongated, and it is forming a greater omentum. So this is forming here greater omentum. So this is forming greater omentum, and here this is forming lesser omentum, and here it is forming different ligaments, right? So clear up to this. So larger part of the backside of the stomach, that is the dorsal mesogastrium, is turning into the greater omentum, right? And actually here comes the spleen into the picture. So here comes the spleen. So in the ventral mesogastrium there is liver in the middle. Here comes the spleen. The spleen is in relation to cranial part of dorsal mesogastrium. And now because of spleen, the dorsal mesogastrium is also dividing into the ventral part and the dorsal part. Okay, so this is the ventral part and this is the dorsal part. So now what forms? Actually in the ventral part there is formation of gastrosclenic ligament. So very easy to remember, this is gastric, right? This is spleen. So gastrosclenic ligament. While the dorsal part, it is forming lenio-renal ligament. Because you can remember, like on posterior side you have kidney. So like that you can remember lenio-renal ligament. So here gastrosclenic ligament, here lenio-renal ligament. So very easy. Now coming to the cranial most part of dorsal mesogastrium. Cranial most part. Actually this dorsal mesogastrium will have some cranial uppermost part, right? That uppermost part will form the gastrophrenic ligament. Phrenic, why? Because here you will have the diaphragm. This is the gastric region. So gastrophrenic ligament, gastrosplenic ligament, lenio-renal ligament. So very simple. These are the ligaments. So you can remember, like on the dorsal mesogastrium you have all ligaments. In the ventral mesogastrium you have, in the ventral side you have the liver ligaments, and on the dorsal side you have the developing lesser omentum. Okay, here there is greater omentum. In the greater omentum, because of spleen, it is divided into ventral and dorsal side. On the ventral side you have the gastrosplenic ligament. On the dorsal side you have the lenio-renal ligament. On the cranial most part of dorsal mesogastrium you have the gastrophrenic ligament. So very simple. Now coming to the midgut and hindgut. So we have seen the ventral and dorsal mesogastrium in the foregut. Now let us come to the midgut part. In the midgut part also, in the front, here you have the ventral mesogastrium and here you have the dorsal mesogastrium. Okay, so what happens here? Let us see. Actually the mesentery of jejunum and ileum, it forms a mesentery of jejunum and ileum, and that is called as mesoappendix, transverse mesocolon, sigmoid mesocolon, and mesenteries of duodenum, ascending colon, descending colon. So actually what is this? Let's see by means of a real diagram. So you can see here, this is the diagram, so which is around our midgut and hindgut. So mainly that is forming a transverse mesocolon. So you can see here in this picture, this is clearly showing a transverse mesocolon, and here you can see this is a sigmoid mesocolon, right? And you can see here the ascending mesocolon, right? So these are the different mesocolons which are formed by between the hindgut and midgut, ventral and dorsal mesogastrium. Okay. So in this mesogastrium, especially if you see the ascending colon, ascending mesocolon, it is absorbed, means it is disappearing later, but the transverse mesocolon is still remaining, and even the sigmoid mesocolon are still remaining. Okay, so that's it. This is all about the peritoneal folds. I hope you have understood this video. Let me also show the real diagrams to once again let us recall, summarize everything. So here you can see this is actually the vertical section of the mesocolons to show this. So if you see, this is the foregut, so this is the ventral mesogastrium and this is the dorsal mesogastrium. In the ventral mesogastrium, because of liver, the ventral mesogastrium is in turn divided into ventral part and dorsal part. The ventral part is forming different ligaments to the liver, and the dorsal part is forming lesser omentum between the stomach and the liver. So done with the ventral mesogastrium. Now coming to the dorsal mesogastrium. In the dorsal mesogastrium, because of presence of spleen, this dorsal mesogastrium is again divided into ventral part and dorsal part. The ventral part is forming gastrosplenic ligament, the dorsal part is forming lenio-renal ligament, the cranial most part is forming the gastrophrenic ligament. Okay, so 3 ligaments are formed, and this dorsal mesogastrium is also extending to form greater omentum. So for that you should see this diagram. Here you can see most of the dorsal mesogastrium is extending to form greater omentum. Most of the the some part between the stomach and liver, there is lesser omentum, right? So you can see here the diaphragm, so the gastrophrenic ligament. Okay, so you can say this structure is clear. Now, if you see in the midgut and hindgut especially, there is no ventral mesogastrium for the midgut and hindgut, right? So did you observe that? There is no ventral mesogastrium for midgut and hindgut. There is only dorsal mesogastrium for the midgut and hindgut. So that dorsal mesogastrium is only forming all these structures like transverse mesocolon, sigmoid mesocolon, ascending mesocolon, okay? So let us also see this diagram and complete this video. So you can see here, this is the ventral mesogastrium, this is above the liver, back of liver you have the dorsal mesogastrium, and you can see here the stomach in the middle and the spleen, okay. So kidney is retroperitoneal because it is only covered by peritoneum only on one side, especially on the posterior side, right? So by this we have completed this. I hope you understood. If you like it, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.